All right, click the links for Odysee, Bit Chute, or Sport Channel on the various coffee subscribes, or even through crypto. Though crypto's, people go like, "Oh, crypto's falling through the floor. It's doing horrible." It's like I've looked at this chart for like a month. It's like, okay, now the X and Y axis. Go ahead and expand that timeline of that chart and look at it again. I'm not a huge crypto person, but you really got to put things in perspective with, cups and handles and chart topography and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so they're talking about this show. Like, holy, everything. I can't swear it in the first 30 seconds. Everything is going to be bad and just going to get worse in the terms of shows. The show, it says it's going to focus on identity politics. There's a thing that kind of drives me a little bit nutty when I hear people say, it's like you can't get mad at people who are, you can. They're adamant about things they just don't know about, but they're so seriously outraged about something that they don't know that they're skating out over thin ice. They're going to tell you, oh, Ferrari's going to take NASCAR next year. It's like Ferrari's going to do great in NASCAR. It's like, no, you don't. It's a different racing series. It's a European versus an American, Japanese series. They race in Europe. It's a whole different thing. It's like, no, they don't race with NASCAR. No, not yet. I don't think they have any plans to. It's just but they're so serious about it. You're like, oh, you just don't know what you don't know. And so when I hear people say stuff like, and it happens on the left and the right, and I'm referring to one thing. I was listening to a live stream. It was Nerdette's Newsstand. It was a month ago. And there's some guys in the live stream, left and right, and kind of going, it was more left to center, and they're talking about woke movies and this kind of stuff, and they're mad at people who don't like woke movies kind of thing. And this one guy who, he's anti-CG, and he's got a channel, it's like his whole thing is being anti-CG or being anti-fundamental CG, which is like, that's a weird way to base a channel, because you're not basing it on criticizing the source material, you're criticizing the people who are criticizing the source material. And this guy is really angry, and you hear a little bit of him, and you kind of want to respond and give him some shit. And then I heard something that just took all the wind out of my sails, because I realized he didn't know the way of the world, he didn't know the lay of the land, he just didn't know what he didn't know. He's talking about woke movies, and he says, oh, they're just doing it to make money. That's their primary motive. And it's like it took everything out of me, because we're like, oh, he just doesn't know what he's talking about. He's either purposely has his eyes, and I think he's got some emotional issues. To be like, anyone who's like that seriously anti-CG has got emotional issues. And I don't mean like CG is some gift from the angels or anything like that. To be anti anything on the internet, like to really wrap your head around it, is kind of weird. To be, there are people who are like, yeah, they're Star Wars fans and they build channels making Star Wars or Star Trek or fandoms in some degree. I get that. You're passionate about something, and there's a lot to be passionate about artistically, but like, to someone who's like, their whole thing is to be anti, not just like the source material, like to be anti Star Trek, which, believe me, I could totally understand. It's a bunch of weirdos who follow Star Trek, and okay, that would be funny, like if your whole shtick was to be anti-Star Trek, but to be anti the people who make fun of the Star Trek or Star Wars or whatever, that's weird, because it's like, it's a step down, and it's automatically appealing to like such a smaller audience. It's strange that you would make that your windmill to tilt against. Anyway, so when you hear people, normies across the spectrum will say that, like, you just know they don't know what they're talking about when they say it. Oh, the primary motive is money, because that it would mean like you're making the same decisions and you're expecting different results. And the people who are into films are not dumb people, or the people who are at least financing the films are not dumb people. And the people who make films are, if you're writing and you're putting all this super complicated stuff together, even a small film's got a lot going into it, they're not dumb people. So when they make stuff like Ghostbusters 2016 or Ocean's 8 or Charlie's Angels, the remakes, the Terminators, the Last X-Men, the Suicide Squad, which it wasn't exactly woke, and it just wasn't that good. When they make all this kind of stuff, they're not. Are you saying that you think they're making this stuff because their motive is profit? Because that would mean that they're making bad decisions repeatedly, and smart people don't make bad decisions repeatedly, and these people have got a lot of money behind them. Movies are in the hundreds of millions of dollars for even a very moderate film. So you're saying all these people are making a continuing cascading series of bad decisions, but they're still getting funded. Something is not adding up. At some point, you have to give them credit for agency. They have agency. They're acting with intent, not merely negligence. That the result of what they're setting out to do is what they set out to do, to make woke films at the cost of return on investment. But their benefit is something that the normie is not seeing. The benefit is the propaganda. And now here's another thing with that term woke that is tossed around a lot. I was thinking about this Vagrant Queen, which we came out like 3 years ago, which wasn't actually as horrible as a lot of other stuff. Like it was better than Batwoman. It had really good sets, and it had good costuming, and it had actors that kind of jumped off the page at you. Now here's the thing: the character, you go, oh, it's woke. It's like, what does woke mean? The lead character was female, BLT, and POC, and it's like, well, is that woke? All that? So it can be. Like, is female automatically de facto woke? No, it's rare that you're going to find a female who's going to find a Sigourney Weaver out there who can pull that off. But are you going to lose the audience if you have a female protagonist like a Tomb Raider? No, there's different ways to do it. It's a little bit harder to pull off than you have a male, but like think of the male action adventure protagonists. There's not that many who were really great. Like you can probably think of a couple dozen off the top of your head who were, were amazing. And then you probably think of a couple females. So it's not like the ratio is that bad for female action adventure heroes, that kind of stuff. So just having a female lead does not doom it. Having a POC lead definitely doesn't doom it. Having a female POC lead, that's a combination where you're starting to lose some of your audience. Depending, she would have to be one charming chick to pull that off. And the next thing is where you do lose your audience is the BLT stuff. That's where you lose a huge chunk of audience. For whatever reason, it's not just men you're losing women too. You're losing everybody who's not BLT. For whatever reason, people, that's a sticking point for people. They just can't identify with it. It's hard to explain if you're, most of us are straight, so we look at this kind of stuff and it's like, so what was it about? Like, you just couldn't see yourself in the character. You couldn't. It's like the willingness, suspension of disbelief. It just didn't click for you. It's hard to explain why. And it might be something that goes back, hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. It's like it just doesn't click. So when you try to make these movies and you do too much, like you got a female, well, that can work. POC, all right. I'm keeping it 100 with you. You're losing some of the audience with POCs. But that can still work. There's a lot of POC characters in films and comics who've done really well. Female and POC, you lose the percentage. But then the gay stuff, it's like, you lose so much when you do that. And when you try to do like, oh, we're going to do all of it at once, well, then you end up with Vagrant Queen. And it's, but the thing is, now Vagrant Queen, you go, was it woke? Now, here's the thing. I saw a bunch of those episodes. I couldn't get through the whole series because it was horrible for a bunch of different reasons. But it wasn't insultingly woke in the sense that a couple of years ago, Star Trek had the CBS streaming. They had a couple of free episodes on. And I remember I watched the first episode or two. And they had the first scene, the first episode was Mr. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy was flying the Explorer's smaller spaceship around doing something. And the POC girl was trying to tell him to dial it back or do something different, and he was like dismissive of her and rude. He didn't exactly fly a stars and bars, but it was like, it was too much. It was just too much, especially in current year. And so his ship crashes, he dies, and the lesson learned to the viewer is he should have listened to the POC girl. It's like that was in the first episode. The first and second episode. It was way too much just right off the bat. Like, how many times have we seen stuff like that? So, like, that's woke, where Vagrant Queen wasn't it was stupid because it was doing so much, but it wasn't like the male characters weren't portrayed as badly as something like the Star Trek was portrayed on CBS. Now that was a couple years ago, and that was woke for whenever that stuff came out, 2017 maybe. This is modern day. This is 2020, 2021, probably filmed. I don't know when they started filming this. This is going to be insane identity politics, off the chart, unwatchably bad. Like there were people who were dipping out for that when that Star Trek stuff came out a couple of years ago. Even people who were Star Trek fans, who are, they're really eager to see something set in that universe. It's like people hung out with Star Wars for a long time because they liked the universe so much. And they were checking out from that. People checked out from Star Wars, from Star Trek, from a lot of these old shows, from comics, from shows in general. So when you're saying like somebody, and the CW, keep in mind the CW is for sale because they're having all this stuff, like all the shows are like, oh, how did our shows do this year? Oh, well, we averaged negative 30%, fewer viewers this year than we did last year. Everything's in the red because, Supergirl and Batwoman, it's like, oh, so they're all like female protagonists. So, like, are they sexy and vivacious and they jump off the screen at you? And are they fun? Like maybe like a 90s show would be? Oh, not exactly. Ah, I see. This is why you've got 400,000 people watching a show with a name recognition like Superman and Batman and Superman. Like that should be pretty much worldwide name recognition, at least, in a big chunk of the world. And you're saying like you get a show that nobody watches and you can watch it for yourself. You can go find Batwoman for yourself. It's just, we could do a Discord watch party, but it's like you'd be there for 5 minutes. Like, I can't believe they made this and this made it past an editor. It's so freaking bad. Yeah. It's like they had like $50,000 to make us probably budgeted per show. And it's like, this is what they did with 50 grand. They spent it on this crap. It's like, why would you just, like, that's the weird thing about Hollywood is there's so much money going around. Like, they can just burn money. They can just burn these $100 bills. And so this is the thing when I heard that normie guy say they're just doing it to make money. You're out of your, like, I'm not even mad at this guy. I'm not gonna say his name because he's kind of a weirdo, and it's not worth getting upset about. It's not worth anti-Comicsgate people getting upset about Comicsgate. Like, if you got a problem with these people, just like move on. But it's also not worth us getting upset. I'm too old to get upset about people like that anyway. But you can't get mad at somebody who just doesn't know what they don't know about the culture war. Like, maybe crack open a history book, read about Weimar Germany that's like going through something a little bit similar. But if you don't want to go back that far, it's like, we'll read about the films that have been successful and then kind of notice the transition. And like, if you wanted to get in the numbers of it, you could kind of look on the return of investment, how much money you put into the film, how much money you expect to get out of it, and what's the timeline of getting your return on investment. And you can kind of look to see when that movie's kind of changed, when the vibe of movies changed. And now you're looking at movies where, because you get the Wu Flu too, which is throwing a monkey wrench in everything. And they're probably using that as an excuse. And it's a fair excuse because, there's a lot of people who are looking at movie theaters and like, oh, I guess, I don't know if I'm going to go back to a theater again. I don't know, but there's a lot of people who've just decided like, yeah, there's no way they're sitting in a theater for 90 minutes wearing an N95 the whole time. That doesn't make any sense to be in like this tiny little, it just doesn't click for a lot of people. So this stuff's going to have to be streaming, but they're not, the thing is, return on investments of films. Trump Derangement Syndrome 2016 was a huge, it was a line, a history, it was a little mark in history for how Hollywood responded to 2016. The 2020 riots is the next big line on how Hollywood was going to respond to that. It's not going to be well. It's going to be stuff like this, which is going to be unwatchable, which is Batwoman is already unwatchable. Vagrant Queen is unwatchable. And Vagrant Queen was better than Batgirl, if I remember right. In regards to like what they did with the money, the sets and the costumes were fantastic. And even the characters were better in Vagrant Queen. They were more likable. And it was just badly written. Which, to be fair, wasn't really Mags Versace's fault, because I don't think they're writing the script for that. I think they handed it off to someone else. But something like Batwoman is just I don't think you can get through a whole episode. Like, I don't mean just playing in the background. I mean, you seriously sit and watch Batwoman. Try to do it for a half hour. Be like, oh, this probably wasn't even fun to make. Anyway, that was like, that's like they're making that. They started making that a few years ago. It's like, this stuff is going to make Batwoman and Vagrant Queen look like, Shakespeare compared to what this is. I'll use her thumbnail to show a picture of her. She some people look just insufferably woke, which is what the show is going to be. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.